The latest NBC News SurveyMonkey online poll shows Trump nationally at 35%, 17 points ahead of Ted Cruz. Marco Rubio, you see there, in third. And perhaps as importantly, Trump supporters are more set on their pick than others, better than half of them saying they're not going to change their mind.
And they probably won't. We've seen consistency in those numbers throughout the months. Joining us now, Scott Rasmussen, you know the name certainly, current president of Stirk.com and former president of Rasmussen Reports and co-founder of a little thing called ESPN. Hello, Scott. Happy New Year, sir.
Happy New Year. Great to be with you today.
Well, great to be here with you, too. All right, so you wrote a piece talking about keeping things in perspective when it comes to the election. You say that the good news is that the hype is bigger than the reality, and that really this election is important, but it's not nearly as important as some would have us believe. How so?
Well, look, every election season we hear people say this is the most important election of our lifetime in the history of the world. Celebrities say they're going to leave the country if things don't go their way. People like to sulk about it. Every candidate will say they're the only one who knows how to lead us to the promised land. But the truth is, culture leads, politics follows. That's the way it's always been in America. Elections do have consequences. We know that. Barack Obama's election had consequences. The midterm victories from Republicans have consequences. But when you take a look, and one of the examples I use all the time is if you go back to the 1970s, things were pretty rough in the political environment, and people were wondering if America could ever be a great country again. Political people like to say, well, Ronald Reagan changed all that. The truth is, Steve Jobs and Bill Gates were working. They dropped out of college. They created these little companies called Microsoft and Apple. They have done more to create the world that we live in today than the last 7 presidents combined.
All right, let me say I give you that. We have never had such a divided country when it comes to the parties. I know, that people try to say, oh, in the good old days, Tip O'Neill had a drink with Ronald Reagan, which was not true, no matter what Chris Matthews says. But, I mean, look, the next president, as Bill Clinton said just the other day, may appoint 2 to 3 Supreme Court justices, could shape the way the court votes for the next 40 years. And if it goes liberal, for instance, to me, gun rights, abortion, it's so many social factors. You talk about the culture, they will shape the culture, just as this Supreme Court. I know today the Supreme Court of Alabama said no to gay marriage. I don't know how that's going to hold up. But just as this Supreme Court has shaped the culture in so many ways.
Look, presidents, again, they have an impact. Who wins an election has an impact. Especially when you talk about Supreme Court justices, they can have an impact. But if you look at the broad sweep of history on every issue, it is the political process that is lagging behind. Another example I give frequently is that in 1964, Congress passed the Civil Rights Act. You would certainly agree with me that that was a hugely important and significant piece of legislation.
Absolutely.
But it came 17 years after Jackie Robinson broke the Major League color barrier. It came 9 years after Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat in a bus in Montgomery, Alabama. Congress did not lead the nation at that time. President Johnson did not lead the nation. 2/3 of Americans wanted that legislation passed at the time. They were following and just ratifying what was already done. If the presidency or if the Supreme Court tries to lead the nation in a direction that runs counter to the culture, they will have problems. Now, when you talk about the partisan nature of things, it's not that we're really more divided as a people than ever before. It's that the federal government has been taking so much power that it seems to matter more.
Absolutely.
Who really cared back in the 1800s what the federal government did? Didn't affect most people.
Great point. And the executive branch. I mean, we're at I think it's pivotal for the reasons I said, the Supreme Court, a bunch of issues, foreign policy, everything. But also, we have a president who, Jonathan Turley, who voted twice for Obama, can't call him a conservative, says that this is what the founders feared, what Obama is doing. And now we see it on guns. We saw it on immigration, and he's not nearly done. So the next president coming in will either continue that or try to respect the office and the Constitution. So I think that's very pivotal.
Yes, and by the way, Barack Obama, I know, aggravates a lot of your listeners. He's not the first person to push these boundaries. I suggest that a lot of the blame goes all the way back at least to Richard Nixon. You know, this is the guy who called in plays to the Washington Redskins huddle because he thought he had something to add. And he's the guy who wanted the president to be in the middle of everything. And so now the president shows up on pregame interviews in the Super Bowl. We have made the presidency so much a part of everyday life and a part of that culture that's become a real problem.
Scott, I mean, he could have the pregame show and the postgame show, but stay away from the Constitution and our guns and everything else. Hey, and Stirk.com, very quickly, 10 seconds, describe it.
Stirk is a new news service, news in the language of everyday Americans, and we have a homepage for every state. Log in and check it out.
All right, Scott, great talking to you. We'll speak to you soon, sir. Thank you.
Thanks.
Malzberg panels next. Don't go away.